The power of Schlock compels you!
Schlock's not here today, priest.
What is up, everybody? I am Darby Ellis Lewis Wilson. This is Chris Anonymous. And as you can see, we have some new digs. How do you like it? We are off of Zoom. We're trying something different, trying to move on up. We are moved on to StreamYard, and we are streaming directly to YouTube currently. But it's a special YouTube because I don't believe you can get there by conventional means. You actually have to go to our Facebook group, the Compelled by Schlock movie discussion group. Holy boy, that's a tongue twister. The Compelled by Schlock movie discussion group. That's where you got to go if you want to see this special live feed. I hope you all can hear us. Let us know in the comments in the chat if everything is working all right, because we want to level up this game here. Chris, it's been a big week. It's been a big few weeks for horror.
It has, yeah. Lots of stuff doing well at the box office. Lots of stuff coming out. So
Yeah,
it's that time of year.
The Nun 2, that spent a few weeks in a row as number one. Saw 10 has come out. That is a big movie this past weekend. I don't know if it was number one yet. I haven't looked at those numbers, but I know it was tracking to be number one. And of course, this coming weekend, Exorcist Believer is coming out. That will be the, let's see, fourth, fifth, technically sixth Exorcist movie, I believe. So we have Exorcist, Exorcist 2, Heretic, nice. Exorcist
That's a lot.
3, and then we have what we are going to talk about today, the odd prequels. Dominion, prequel to The Exorcist, and Exorcist, the beginning. So what we were originally going to do, we talked about this last week, was we were going to do just Dominion because it's free on Amazon Prime, and so we're like, oh, we'll just do that. We'll do the prequel. But as we watched it, it's just such a weird thing, and as we looked into it, it's also weird. We felt like we had to watch the beginning as well to sort of fill in the context of this movie.
Yeah, it's very strange what happened here.
Yeah, so to fill everybody in, Dominion, that was released in 2005, but it was actually filmed prior. So they created this movie, and Morgan Creek created this movie. They wanted to make an Exorcist prequel, and they looked at it and they said, this is terrible. We're going to completely redo this movie. And then they redid it, and they created Exorcist the Beginning and released that. So that came out in 2004. Eventually, they're like, okay, let's release Dominion. And so that came out in 2005. I can't think of a single time this has happened anywhere else with movies. I know we have the Snyder cut of the Justice League, right? That's basically a different movie, but it's like same actors. It's mostly reshoots, right?
Well, and this was a reshoot, except for it was such an extensive reshoot that it was a whole new movie,
right? Vampires, John Carpenter's Vampires. Have you ever seen that? I believe they redid that movie like with Bon Jovi. Like James Woods was the original like star in it, and then it looks like they remade that with Bon Jovi. I haven't seen the Bon Jovi version, so I don't know if it's a similar deal.
I have no idea. That's interesting. I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, we'll have to put that on the list. But yeah, this is just such a crazy thing. We decided that we had to talk about it. So let's. Well, first let me give you some figures and numbers here. Dominion, it costs about $30 million to create. Once it was eventually released, it only pulled in about over $250,000. So drop in the bucket from what it cost to create. Believer, on the other hand, it cost $50 million to make and pulled in $78 million at the box office. Now, that's a pretty good return for $50 million. I mean, it didn't double it, so it wasn't a roaring success. It didn't double its budget, so it wasn't a roaring success, but it did make back most of its money. But the thing is, the movie in total really costs about $80 million if you lump Dominion in with
Plus
it.
advertising and everything else.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was able to find an interview with Gary J. Turncliffe. He was one of the special effects leads on Exorcist. The beginning, they brought him in to kind of consult on all this stuff and help out in the new creation. He's very big in horror. He's behind a lot of the newer Hellraiser stuff. And he said that the Morgan Creek was actually very happy with the amount of money that the beginning brought in. So, and I think eventually Dominion, right? It's a full movie. Why not release it and try and recoup some of that costs?
I guess, yeah.
Even more. Yeah. I mean, why wouldn't you? Why just have it sit in the can and not make you any money?
You have to wonder, though, what it would have done if they just would have released it in the first place.
Well, we can get into that, because I'm guessing probably not great.
It's hard to say. It's hard to say.
So anyway, the way we do this show is we like to talk about the good, the bad, and the schlock. We like to talk about what we liked, what we didn't like, and sort of the big ideas surrounding these weird movies. There is a big spoiler alert. We are going to spoil not one, not two, but every movie that you could possibly imagine. Like, nothing is off limits for us. But before we get into all of this, we like to talk about the actors, where they've come from, where they've been, if we've seen them before, in a little segment we call Web of Schlock. Chris, what do you have for us?
Since we have two movies to talk about, we're mainly focusing on Dominion. The main actor, Stellan Skarsgård, great actor. I mean, he's in a lot of Marvel movies, the Thor. I remember him, I think the first time I saw him was Good Will Hunting. A lot of dramas, a lot of art house movies, and then a lot of really strange movies. And then big Marvel blockbusters. He's just kind of all over the board and still working today, and very enjoyable to watch. And then the main female lead in Dominion is Clara Beller, and her she was an AI. That's what I remember her from. And if we're just strictly speaking Dominion, there's not a ton of other actors. There's one other lead. It's a relatively small cast. It's a lot of extras and a lot of bit parts and a lot of people, but like the actual cast is pretty small. It expanded a little bit with the beginning, but let's go to the writer of Dominion, William Wisher. One of his first credits is additional dialogue for the first Terminator.
Interesting. Some punch up.
Yeah, some punch up, and then he has T2. He has story credit on. He wrote, co-wrote T2 with Cameron. Then the Judge Dredd from the 90s with Sylvester Stallone. And he also wrote The 13th Warrior.
Oh, two big thumbs up on that one.
Yeah, love me some 13th Warrior. And then the director, Paul Schrader, very famous writer. He's been directing a lot too. A lot of dramas, a lot of indie films, a lot of art house films, but he did in the 80s he directed Cat People, kind of schlocky. but his writing, he kind
Yeah, I
of
think
is
that's
with
where the
Scorsese,
cream is.
right?
Yeah.
Taxi Driver,
Mm-hmm.
Last Temptation of Christ,
Mm-hmm.
Raging Bull. Um, just he's a very well respected writer,
So did
and
he do any writing on this? Because he when the studio said that they didn't like what he produced, he said, "Hey, I did a faithful adaptation of the script that you gave me."
yeah, it doesn't give him credit on IMDb,
Okay.
so I don't know how much he touched up or did not touch it up, but I think it would have been a little better had he done that. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then for beginning, I just want to touch on the director Renee Harland. We've seen him
Mm-hmm.
before here. Again, an amazing director. A lot of great films. We saw Deep Blue
Deep
Sea.
Blue Sea. Yeah.
Yep, but there's also Long Kiss Goodnight, Cutthroat Island, Cliffhanger, um, uh, my Die Hard 2, uh, one of the
A lot of good popcorn flicks.
a lot of good popcorn flicks. Yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street 4. That's the one that I couldn't think of just there.
Mm.
So you can really kind of tell the different directing styles, but we'll get into that. That's since this is going to be such a long show. That's it for Web of Schlock.
Yeah. I do want to set the record straight on something though, as far as the cast goes between Dominion and the beginning. So I've read this in multiple places online. Even that interview with Gary Turncliffe, they say that the only person to return was Stellan Skarsgård
No,
of the
there's a
original
fair
cast.
amount.
Yeah, I think when they say the only person to return of the original cast, they must mean the leading cast, meaning
Yeah.
the younger priest, Father Francis, is that
Yep.
right? And the nurse Rachel,
Yep.
because those three, uh, they're different.
Skarsgård. Yeah, he's the only
And
one to return.
but everybody else, other than like additional characters or like background actors, everyone else is the same.
Yep.
And so I think that they need to get some credit for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, let's move on from the Web of Schlock into good. I can't remember. Did I pick this movie or did you pick it?
I think you picked it because last week I picked it. So yeah.
All right. Well,
I'll
yeah. What do
start
you
with
got?
um the story idea. It's a solid story idea. I really like the two leads. I like Stellan. I like Clara. I like the setting, and I like some of the really surreal imagery in it, even when it doesn't quite work. I still like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I got.
Very short list.
Yeah, very short list.
Yeah. Also, Skarsgård, amazing. I think he's a great pick. Um, I do really think the movie is kind of a diamond in the rough. There are some really big theological ideas in this that are attempted to be wrestled with, like when they are kind of doing the showdown with the demon. They never say that it's Pazuzu, which is kind of a problem with the movie, I think, because this is supposed to be his original encounter with
Right.
Pazuzu. But the demon, he like gives him this flashback, this attempt where he can like go back and do something different during the Nazi occupation, and he only winds up making it worse. Um, I,
Right.
I think that's really interesting. I don't know if it plays very well for me, like what the whole purpose of that was, but I think that's a really interesting idea. That like, I mean, there's some really deep theological ideas behind that of about suffering, and we live in a world that has like the right amount of suffering in it in order for us to keep free will. And I think that they really play with some of those ideas. I don't think that they deliver on them, but those kernels are there. And the whole idea of yeah, there's demons and there's evil out there, but what about the evil that lives inside of humans, right? That doesn't need any real coaxing from demons. And we sort of see this cool juxtaposition of this battle going on outside where there's people losing their faith. There's a war that's about to break out. There's all these bad things outside of this church temple, and the inside of the church temple, it's happening on more of a metaphorical level, right? Like I do think that was a really cool idea. Again, don't know if it played out very well, but it was a cool idea.
There were some, again, I liked also the different references and icons, like, when the demon first murders the two people, it's done, upside down crucifixion, head on a platter. Later on, we see like an homage to Saint Sebastian, and then just like in that, he doesn't immediately die; he dies elsewhere. So it's interesting that like they were bringing different things up. Also, the hyenas and what they represent. There were a lot of theological and moral questions brought up, and I don't think it handled it well. But I agree with you. There was some meat to chew on.
And my last good thing on it is that intro, the whole just awful moral conundrum of the Nazis asking him to pick 10 people to die, like that really sets some high stakes and some big moral questions for the movie. They refilmed that for beginner, and I don't think that they needed to redo any of that. I think that they, I guess I don't know like what happened behind the scenes of like what was usable footage and what wasn't, but I think that whole sequence was very tense, and I think that was probably one of the highlights of the movie, acting wise, stake wise, something to really pull you in the beginning. So that's what I have for good. What about bad? How long's that list?
Yeah, not a lot. Some of the special effects with the hyenas, and it's not their fault. They got a very limited special effects budget after the fact, after they decided to release the film. There are some pacing issues. My biggest two things are, and maybe this is just exorcism films in general, but like the whole crisis of faith seems cliche to me now.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to making that what your movie's about, but I don't think that every single priest you have has to be going through a crisis of faith in your movie. It just feels lazy now. I think that's a very smart thing to do because it's got an arc built into it. And I loved it in From Dusk Till Dawn. There's lots of movies where you have someone of faith losing faith and then finding faith again.
Yeah.
I think at this point it felt kind of cliched and just like I've seen this already.
Well, it was really weird in this movie. In Dominion, he's basically like on sabbatical, and I think that they're going to at some point in time review his status as a priest.
Right.
Whereas one of the rewrites in the beginning, like he's out. He's no longer a priest, and I think that was a smart choice.
Right.
And just like making that a hard line.
Right. And well, it makes it when he comes back more special, but
right.
Again, in both films, I think there are different ways to handle that. And then my biggest bad is that it is really heavy-handed and on the nose.
Oh, how so?
Just again, the religious icons, the imagery, how everything happens at the same time, how everything's over the top. The hyenas, like clearly they're a metaphor. We get it. Again, I think you could have been more subtle with it. Some of what the demon's saying in that final battle, the Aurora Borealis. Again, it felt like, look, religious stuff. And I'm like, yeah, we get it. I think you could be a little more subtle and it would have been a lot more effective.
Yeah.
So there's some of it I really liked, like the ideas behind a lot of it I really liked. I just felt like, okay, now this part's happening. And of course, all the things are happening at the same time. And I don't know. It felt very heavy handed and on the
So
nose to me.
I liked that. You didn't like it.
I like the idea of it. I think they could have handled it better.
Yeah.
The idea of the false healer and the crippled healing and then turning into a vessel for the demon. That's interesting, but again, it's like I saw it a mile away.
Right.
Again, nothing subtle.
Right. Okay. Well, my bads are pretty similar as far as the effects go. It had bad CGI, which I mean, the other movie, right? It had what
Slightly better.
20 million extra dollars to work with, and I think to complete Dominion they got like 35,000 to complete the special effects in it. But the thing is, I mean, there's other effects in it that aren't CGI that are pretty hokey, like Chi-Chi's makeup I think is just awful. There's like a part where he hits the priest and he goes flying backward, and it's supposed to be like in slow motion or something. It's a really weird shot because he's like flying backward in slow motion, but you see like one of the braziers burning, but the fire's like in real time, and so I don't know if that's on purpose or if that's, I mean, the sound makes it sounds like it's in slow motion. I don't know. Like, I think that there are just also some not great practical effects in it, and just having the bad CGI on top of that really makes a lot of that stuff stand out. The acting, I feel like there's a lot of bad acting in this, and in that interview with Turncliffe, he said that they felt that some of the acting in it was atrocious, and he was like, I'm not going to name names, but they're the ones that weren't there when we made the beginning. They're the ones that we replaced, and I would have to agree.
I like the female lead in Dominion. I didn't care for the performance of the young priest in Dominion. I thought it was much better portrayed in the beginning.
Yeah, I couldn't stand it. But the thing is I don't think that the dialogue was very good. Like, I don't know if they had a lot to work with, but while I was watching Dominion, I was like, I don't know if I've ever seen a movie with more non sequiturs in it. Like, they're just saying things, and there's like not a lot of context. Like when the soldiers are standing outside guarding the temple, they're like, "Oh, I bet there's 1,000 of them in there," or whatever, and you're like, thousands of what? And they're talking about like precious stones in there, and it just takes a while to figure out like what they're talking about. And then, like, I think maybe one of the worst offenses is at the very end. It's after, after the night of conflict, after the demon is gone, and Skarsgård is talking to the sergeant, and the sergeant says something along the lines of, "And I didn't see a thing," wink. And I'm like,
right.
What the hell are you talking about? For one, you didn't see a thing, right? Because you were outside. In fact, I don't think you ever saw any of the actual like demon stuff. And also, what, you're going to act like nothing happened here? No one was killed. No, like it just is so nonsensical to me that I'm like, the dialogue is not very good. And then the last thing, the dreams. You said that you like the surrealism. I hated the dreams in it, man. Like the weird imagery. It's fine for another movie, but I think in the beginning they kept they kept the idea of dreams and visions in there, but I think they used it much more effectively by showing that he's haunted that Father Merrin is haunted by the events of like the Nazi killings, and they disseminate that story throughout. I think a little bit better, right? It just makes the dreams more tangible for the audience to follow, like why he's haunted and what he's being haunted about.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I like the idea of the surrealist imagery. I don't think it works in this, but I like that. I just wish it would have worked. But yeah, it's everything is more streamlined in the beginning. It just is.
I wish it all would have worked.
Yeah.
But that's all I have for bad. I'm ready to move into Schlock, and because I do want to talk more about the imagery, because I didn't get it. I didn't get a lot of this imagery, and I wanted to know if you had any ideas, like the whole idea of the cattle eating the hyenas. The hell's that supposed to mean? Like,
well, are the infant covered in maggots? Or the Aurora Borealis?
So the maggot baby, does that happen? Like, I know stillbirths happen, but I mean,
my guess is no, but I don't know. It felt supernatural in both films, and they kept it in both films.
One in the beginning, it was a little more gruesome, which is really weird. That's another scene that I think that they could have just kept. You know, that they didn't need to refilm, but they basically refilmed it verbatim and just made the baby grosser. Yeah.
You know, I think the problem is that a lot of this was supposed to be provocative and or like just like no substance behind the metaphors and the images. Like, yes, let's make these references to different martyrs and how we kill the people in this film, but like to what end, or what do the hyenas exactly represent? Because hyenas throughout a lot of Middle Eastern and African mythology and biblical things have a lot of really interesting and different ideas behind them and what they represent and what they don't represent. But again, I don't know what you're trying to say with it. I think I don't think the filmmakers really knew what they wanted to say with it. I just think they wanted it to look like they were saying something.
What are some of the things hyenas represent? I've just never come across this.
When you look at mythology, some are good luck, some are bad luck, some are believed to be what witches ride. Some are killed, and a lot of their body parts are used in a lot of medicinal purposes. There's some translations of the Bible where like they think that the word hyena was accidentally mistranslated as like large bird, but it was actually hyena. Like if you just look into it, there's lots of really interesting stuff. And it's interesting because I can't remember if it's because this takes place in East Africa. And I was looking at different mythologies, and in East Africa versus West Africa, they're very, very different takes on the hyena. And I like the whole idea of, you know, the religion that was there, and then the Christianity coming in, and then the Red Cross, and then you have Britain, and then you have ideas from the World War and Nazis, and then it's this big thing where everything's kind of like pushing and pulling at each other, and it starts to boil up in the film. And that's really a cool idea of like, yeah, this is a place where bad things can happen and will happen. I just don't think they explore it very well. And I think it's just like, it's too vague. And sometimes that's what you want for imagery, but sometimes you need to like a few more breadcrumbs out there so we can actually understand it by the end of the film. And instead of breadcrumbs, we just get really bizarre imagery. Like again, I keep going back to the Aurora Borealis, but it's such a weird thing to have her walking around, and it's all like the sky's lit up and she has a knife to her throat. And I'm like, this is just silly. And I like how it looks, but it's just silly. Yeah. I don't like how like the demon morphed into like a
Buddha
Barbie version of the Last Airbender.
Well, yeah. So what about some of that imagery? Megan and I, we were talking a lot about this during the movie. Like he gets in kind of an Eastern pose, right? He's cross-legged, he's shaved head,
Yeah,
he looks like a version of the
it was
Buddha.
very. He looked like a version of the Buddha. You can't tell me that was on accident. And I'm like, so what are you trying to say here? I've no idea what's going
And
on. Again, you're thrusting
I
iconic imagery at us without any giving us any substance to help us piece together this puzzle that you're
I
making.
I had a theory about that, but it proved to be wrong. So Pazuzu in Mesopotamian mythology uh, it represents the wind, and I thought it was maybe the eastern wind, and thought,
Mm,
oh, he's bringing in like sort of Eastern mythology and ideas because he's talking about like I'm perfection, and so maybe he's like talking about like enlightenment and some like soured enlightenment. But no, he's actually the southern wind. So
mm.
that theory like went out the window with the wind. So yeah,
So you get whiffs of like really delicious barbecue.
yeah, exactly. Well,
Mm.
and that's a great metaphor for the movie. You get these whiffs of good
Right.
things, but then
So
they turn out to be farts.
So I think we can sum up the whole movie to me in saying that do not build a Red Cross school village mission thing on an elephant graveyard because that's what happened.
Right. Is that what it was? That was an elephant graveyard?
I mean, it reminds me of the elephant graveyard from Lion King, man. It's like, don't go there. That's where all the hyenas are. That's where
Yeah.
death is.
Yeah.
That's where all the dark stuff is. I'm saying that they just like, you know what? What if we set an exorcism movie in the elephant graveyard sequence from Lion King? And they're like, you know what? Yeah, let's do that. And then they did. The end.
Right. Well, so moving on, I got a few more questions for you. Just kind of comparing the two films together.
Mm-hmm.
The Major's descent into madness. Which did you prefer? And so I'll let the audience in on it because, like I said, we said we were only going to watch Dominion, but then we wound up watching both of them. In Dominion, he sees his soldiers killed. Uh, uh, not he doesn't see them killed. He sees their desecrated bodies,
Mm-hmm.
and then he like kind of slowly starts to check out. And then he tells his sergeant, "Tell Father Mirren, like I understand what he's going through or whatever." Then he like kills himself. He shoots himself in the head with a gun. So he's descended into madness in some way and ends his life. In the beginning, he see what is it? Does he just go into the temple? What sparks it on there? I can't remember. But he a similar situation. He
No,
starts
it was the murder of one of his people.
okay. Well, he starts going crazy, but then it shows him like actually like seeing visions, right? Like like weird noises. He's seeing his butterfly collection starts moving, and then something starts to crawl out of his mouth, and he puts his gun in his mouth, trying to shoot it, and shoots himself, ending his life. And to me, that I felt like that played out a lot better. Like it just showing that sort of psychosis, and to me, that's a better use of like surrealist imagery, right? Like I think that's a part in the beginning where they could have leaned more into the surrealist imagery, showing like sort of his mental deterioration to where he would commit suicide. Whereas in Dominion, it just all kind of happens very quickly. Um, he kind of does in Dominion, he does sort of a similar thing to the Nazis, and maybe that maybe him knowing that he is
See,
maybe one of the bad guys is what does it. I don't know. It,
so
it just doesn't connect it very
that
well.
was that was in Dominion. That was another example of the heavy-handedness that I hated. Of
Oh,
course, they paralleled the British officer who's going to kill them the exact way the Nazis did, and like it's the same shot setup, same angles, same everything. I'm like, we
Hmm.
get it. You don't have to hit us over the head with it. We get it. Um, I liked it in the beginning a lot more. I think it worked more effective.
Oh, really?
I do like the crazy imagery in beginning. Again, he was such a minor character. I There were bits of the dialogue and bits of the things in Dominion that I wish they would have kept and put in the beginning, but overall, I prefer it in the beginning.
Right. Um. Yeah. So what else? Like, what are some of the other things that have stuck out to you between in either film?
Well, what stuck out to me, and this is kind of a meta thing, more like a wish list, or just we've talked about like ways to see movies and fan theories and different things, and so I'll put out what I'd like to see and what you could possibly take away from this. So we have two versions of pretty much the same film.
Hmm.
I can wait till the end to tell you which I prefer. Although there's things I really loved in both and tons I hated in both. Um, have you ever seen an old film called Rashomon?
Rashomon. That's a Japanese flick.
Yep, yep. So
Never
basically,
seen it. Heard about it.
it's you hear the same event told from different people's point of views, and they're different stories, right? And then you
Hmm.
piece together what actually happened because of taking bits from each of those. And I think that you could almost treat this like if the demon, like what really happened here. Well, there's the version of the Dominion, there's the version of the beginning, and I think that neither one is like the true story. I think
Hmm.
it's somewhere in between. It'd be really interesting if they filmed Sarsgaard again for like a third film of this. That like okay, now let me tell you what really happened here.
Yeah.
Like they're similar enough and they're different enough that I really think you could do something cool with the idea of that neither one is canon. They're both from someone's
Yeah.
perspective, and why are they different and how are they similar and what's really going on, because they 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 vary in such strange spots and yet they stay the same, and also like a lot of weird story choices of like which characters to remove, which ones to put in, and that whole idea of memory and prequels, right? Like if he's looking back on his life, remembering what happened and how he first encountered this demon, memory's fallible, right?
Hmm.
Things are suppressed, truth is distorted, and so it's really interesting to watch something about similar themes and see it done in this meta way of like
Yeah.
actually there are two different versions of this. Yeah, so
Well,
that's my big takeaway.
in a way, so I believe the original Exorcist movie, don't they like often say like, oh, based on a true story, like this is based on real events in some way, which it wasn't. I mean, it was based on a book. I mean, I think it's based on true events in the same way that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is based on true events, right? Like someone read something about Ed Gein. It was like, oh, serial killer that like
Right,
digs up
right.
dead people.
Yeah.
And then they make something like totally like they just take that idea and just completely run with it. But Exorcist has kind of this mystique about it, this mystery around it that yeah, this really happened, you know. And by putting out two of the same movie that, you know, they're pretty similar but slightly different, it kind of adds to that mystery that oh yeah, this really did happen, and this is one person's version of it and this is another person's version of it. So maybe it fits. Maybe this is just very apropos for an Exorcist movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can't recommend watching either of these films by themselves to somebody, but if you watch them together and think of it in that sort of meta way, I think it's really compelling and kind of cool.
Mhm. And I believe so. Right now, what a lot of people are reviewing is The Exorcist 3. I've never seen it. Apparently, it's a very good movie, but that has an alternate cut of it as well. I guess that went through some heavy reshoots to sort of retool the ending, because I don't think there was like an actual exorcism scene in it. And so many years later, it was based on a book called Legion, who was written by the original author of the original Exorcist. And so they did a new cut of it, and they call it Legion. So similar, like we have Exorcist the Beginning and Dominion. We also have Exorcist 3 and Legion, right? So again, adding to this, it's sort of real, man. This may actually be true, and we're seeing it from different perspectives.
Yeah, you know, it's like also kind of like a fairy tale, you know, seeing it told through different ways. So yeah, there's something very folklore and mythological about it that adds a, I don't know, a sense of wonder and fear.
So maybe with Believer, we'll get another cut of that at some point in time.
Hopefully it's Exorcist Belieber, where they just replace some of the cast with Justin Bieber.
The little girls, the possessed little girls, is just a possessed Justin Bieber.
That would be, yep, Exorcist Belieber.
I hope that they play that Imagine Dragons song throughout the entire thing. Believer, right?
That would be hilarious. Yeah,
just totally undercut the any sort of
any tense moment. You just hear those big drums in the song come in, and then it starts up.
Yeah. So,
yeah, man.
But speaking of the possessed, the little girls in Believer, I think that in Exorcist the Beginning, I think it was such a wise choice to cut out the character of Chi-Chi and replace it with a little kid.
Smart, very smart.
Because I don't know if I saw that coming at all, that it was going to be the nurse in the end.
No, it was.
I think maybe they could have done it a little bit better, but
yeah, I think that, I don't know. I was looking at different reviews, and like I think Beginnings is a much better movie. Like, is it a great Exorcist prequel? No, it's way too like epic and actiony. Like, it opens up like Indiana Jones. And I'm like, that would be a fun way to take a priest exorcism movie, but that's not the prequel to The Exorcist. You want to give them some of that familiar, some of that slow burn and that creep and it, you know, this great epic battle, and it's panning back to all these people crucified upside down, and it just keeps going and going, and there are crows flying, and it's like, it's so epic. And then we cut to Egypt, and it's straight out of Indiana Jones.
Right.
And that actually I really loved. I just don't think it's appropriate for an Exorcist prequel.
It's so weird, because at the end of Dominion, they have this song. The band is called Dog Fashion Disco, and it's like this heavy metal song playing over the credits. So it's just completely out of character for the entire movie, for the tone of the movie and for the era of the movie.
It seems like Nun's Curse of Them.
Yeah, very Nun's Curse of Them. It seems like it would have been better to be in the beginning, right? That it's more of that, more
like they should have played that
action
during that epic battle at the end. Like, again, that's a cool idea. It's not appropriate for an Exorcist prequel. Like, right. It felt like they hired
the battle
an action director.
or the music.
The battle I thought was really awesome, but again, it's a different film. Like, they hired this awesome action director, and he did some awesome action and other stuff, and like just some beautiful shots in it, and just there's a lot of fun in the movie. But again, I think that detracts from what you really wanted in an Exorcist prequel.
Like, I think in the beginning, I think that they had to do the battle at the end because it ends where it began.
Correct.
Right? And they set that up. But the thing is, I think I like it better in Dominion, where everything, it's just like at the precipice, right? Everything is about to go to hell, you know, literally in some way. And it all sort of hinges on what Father Merrin does inside of the temple. Can he defeat the evil there to stop it? out there, and I like that idea better. But I do have to agree with you, and I think we might be in the minority. I think The Beginning is a much better movie. I think it's a much tighter movie. Like I think
they took all the
yeah.
They took all the great parts from Dominion and streamlined it, and they made connections that weren't there before, and just made it really understandable that you could flow along with everything.
Yeah. Are there things that could have been done better?
Bit of dark and more flavor. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Again, I don't think this is the movie that people want for an Exorcist prequel, and so I don't care how good it is. It's not. Yeah, I don't know. I think the ideas, morally, were a little more intriguing in Dominion. There was some slow.
Oh, you're cutting out, buddy.
So. Again, there's stuff I love in both movies, and I don't think either one is a good prequel to such a great movie. So yeah. What are your final thoughts on this, man?
I mean that's kind of it. I think The Beginning is much more streamlined. I think it's just put together a lot better. I think they made wise choices with the cuts that they made in the actors and in the characters in general. Like where I like their use of dreams better. I like, I think all around it's a better movie, but I do like the ideas in Dominion better. Like I just wish that I could marry these movies together into one good movie. One awesome movie.
I think Dominion was closer to what an Exorcist prequel should be. I just don't think they pulled it off well. And I think Beginning is very, very far from what an Exorcist prequel should be, but they pulled it off pretty well.
Like maybe they should have let Schrader retool the script and then let what's his name, Harlan, direct it.
Yeah.
Like that, that would have maybe been the better route to go.
Yeah. So, I mean, someone out there, they just make a third one, and then they just piece it all together.
We could have gotten the Last Temptation of Christ, directed by a Die Hard director.
Right.
That would have been amazing.
That is the real travesty here. Is that there's all the people involved are extremely talented, at least behind the scenes, like writer and director. And it just feels like they were put in the wrong positions and spots. And yeah, I agree. The Last Temptation of Christ
meets Die Hard.
Die Harder.
So Rise Harder. So just as last thoughts, Chris, who would you recommend these movies to? Like, what audience do you think would appreciate either movie or both?
I mean, so completists, people who have to see everything in a franchise, people who are intrigued by philosophical ideas, and people are into like just weird meta theories with film. But I mean, I can't recommend either one by themselves. Watch them together if you're in the mood for something really strange.
Next week, we are doing Friday the 13th, part 2. You're probably going to have to get it on Amazon, but we can't wait to get back into this series. Happy Schlocktober, everybody. I am Darby Ellis Wilson. This is Chris Anonymous. We've been compelled by Schlock. And we will see you next week.
Wait, no.